page 97. Let's get into this. Check our timeline. It's finally here. That big day. July 4th, 1776. That's your country's birthday. That's the day the United States of America began. No longer were we English colonies, not part of England at all. We were our own separate, independent country. On our own. Independence Day, right? July 4th, 1776. That's what we're going to talk about today, that Declaration of Independence. Thinking back to yesterday, that Second Continental Congress, we said it started in May 1775. Anybody remember what that arrow meant? Why did I put an arrow up there? Anybody remember?
Because it went a year.
Kept on going, right? It's ongoing. In other words, that meeting at Congress didn't just last through May, or not even just through 1775, right? Went all the way into 1776. And that brings us to the top of page 97. This is still part of that Second Continental Congress. Then one day, something remarkable happened, something completely different. It happened on June 7th. One of the delegates from the colony of Virginia stood up. The man's name was Richard Henry Lee. I think he was the grandfather of a man named Robert E. Lee, which our county, that's who our county happens to be named after, so we have a little connection here. Anyway, Richard Henry Lee stands up and he makes a proposal. He's got a new idea. He's going to share it with the rest of the men in the room. There's 56 guys there. Remember, he's one of the guys from Virginia. He says, I got a new idea. This is what he says. Follow along. It's in quotations. These united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. And the other guys in the room were like, whoa, whoa, this is a whole new idea. What Richard Henry Lee is saying is pretty radical. First of all, let's look at what he's not saying. He's not saying we need to continue demanding for our equal rights as what?
British.
As Englishmen, right? Says no, not interested in getting our equal rights as Englishmen. Richard Henry Lee saying, I think it's pretty clear by now, June of 1776, do you think King George III is finally going to change his mind and give us our equal rights as Englishmen? Nah, not going to happen. He hired mercenaries, for goodness sakes. I don't think he's going to change his mind. So Richard Henry Lee says, from now on, he's not saying we should quit. He's not saying we should give up. He's saying we should keep fighting, but not fighting for our rights as Englishmen. Fight for independence. We should break free of England. He's saying these should not be English colonies. Let's look at his words again now that we explained that. These united colonies, they're all meeting together, right? In Philadelphia, all 13. Are, and of right, we ought to be free and independent. What?
Free and independent.
Free and independent what? Finish this quote. States. We're not colonies anymore. Now we're the United States. We're not English colonies, we're our own country. Whole new country coming into existence on the face of the earth. Ethan?
So he was Robert E. Lee's grandfather?
Yes.
Didn't Robert E. Lee try to break away from the United States? Start
Isn't that
another
ironic?
country?
That's a good point. Good observation, Ethan. Alright, so that was June 7th. Everybody in the room's like, okay, whoa, we're not saying that's a bad idea. We should consider this idea. This might be a good idea, Richard Henry Lee, but let's think this through carefully. So they decided to put a committee together, a committee of 5 men. Alright? Some of those guys in the committee you've heard of, these 5 men. One of them's name was John Adams. He's from Massachusetts. He's a really smart guy, but a little bit of a big mouth. really opinionated. Another guy on the committee is a more mild-mannered guy from Virginia. His name is Thomas Jefferson, and he's also brilliant. And in the committee, they start figuring out how to put this into writing. See, the committee, the reason they made a committee is the 56 men in the group said, let's write this down. If we really do become a separate country, let's write down what we're doing, what that would look like, why we're doing it, so we can explain to the world what's going on, what just happened and why we did it. So we'll make a committee of 5 guys to write it. So then these 5 guys, Adams and Jefferson, we're gonna talk about lessons later on in the year. They weren't the best of friends. They respected each other, but they didn't always get along. And because of his big mouth, John Adams was kind of like dominating the meetings in this small group, this 5-man committee. But finally one day he said, you know what? I hate to admit this, Thomas Jefferson, but you're a better writer than me. So why don't you write this down, put it in writing. And Jefferson basically said, well, all right then, shut up and let me do it. Give me some peace and quiet. All right, so Jefferson put himself in his private room all by himself, and for a few days he wrote, and what he came out with is what we call the Declaration of Independence. Over here on the bulletin board is the official copy of it over there on the bulletin board. And it's the document that gives birth to our country. And does the United States still exist? Of course it does. That's where we are, right? So if we still exist and this is the document that gave birth to it, then guess what that means? That means this document still applies, right? Still in effect. So let's look at what he said. In that first paragraph, basically he says, if we're going to do this, Thomas Jefferson writes this down, if we're going to do this, then just out of courtesy and respect, we should explain what we're doing exactly and why we're doing it. All right, so that's what a declaration. That's an announcement, right? We are going to declare something. Who are we going to send this to? Who are we going to give a copy of the Declaration to?
England?
King George III needs to get one, doesn't he? Wish I'd have been there when he read it. King George III, we're not part of your country anymore. Have a nice life. You're not our king. You're not fit to be a king of free people. Nope, not interested. All right, so we got to send a copy to him, but you know what? We also have to send a copy to all 13 colonies. Because think about the people that live in those colonies. They kind of need to know, don't they? Guess what? You're not Englishmen anymore. You're Americans. You don't live in a colony anymore. You live in a state. They need a copy, don't they? And we need to explain to them why we're doing this. How about the leaders of all the other countries of the world? France, Spain, Germany, whoever. They kind of need to know that from now on, when they deal with this part of the map, they're not dealing with England anymore. They're dealing with a whole new country, the United States of America. And don't you think we should explain why we had to do that? Just out of respect. We don't want everyone in the world to think we're a bunch of crazy hotheads who just don't like authority. No, we're going to explain. I read through the Declaration of Independence more than once, but one time I was reading, I counted them. I think it was 20-some, maybe 23, if I remember right, sentences that start with the word he. He did this, and he did that, and then he did this, and he did this. He's referring to King George III. We're writing all the things down. We said he taxed us without representation, right? He forced us to put soldiers in our house. We sent him an olive branch, and he hired mercenaries. He closed the Boston port. All these things that King George III did, we're letting everyone in the world know he's not fit to be the king of a free people. That's why we had no choice but to separate. We're not just a bunch of hotheads who don't like authority. We're very reasonable people, and we tried everything to get our equal rights as Englishmen, but now we're not doing that anymore. Now we're declaring our independence. Just making making more sense now, what actually happened? All right, I want you to look at the paragraph that starts with, "We hold these truths." In fact, I'm gonna put that up on the screen. This is the famous part of the Declaration of Independence. I would bet that you have probably heard these words before. Maybe you knew it was from the Declaration of Independence, maybe you didn't, but I bet you've heard these words. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Raise your hand if you've ever heard those words before. Now let's look at it carefully. And I think you'll be amazed when we're done, what it really says. You can read, right? I can read, you can read. Let's see what it really says. Let's dig into it. We. Stop right there. Who's we?
United
Us.
States.
That's us, that's Americans. They weren't just referring to we, the people in the room in the Second Continental Congress. They're not just referring to we, the colonists alive in those days. They're talking about we, Americans. That's you, that's me. We are the we. Well, what do? We hold. Hold means deeply believe. Well, in other words, we hold it close to our heart. We hold tight. Hold tight to what? These truths. Oh, there's that word again. Truth. Are we saying we believe, or are we saying that this is my truth? Or is this your truth? Or what is this?
Absolute.
The truth, the absolute truth. Who believes there's absolute truth? We do. Who's we? Americans. This is what Americans believe. This paragraph sums it up, what we're all about as Americans. Hey, do you think every American agrees with this? No. You know what that means? That means they don't agree with American ideals. That means their attitudes are un-American. They might be Americans, but their attitudes are un-American. How do we know? Because this is the document that gave birth to this country. This is still in effect because the country is still here. So now let's keep going. We hold these truths. We deeply believe some things to be true. They're self-evident. These things are so true, we don't even need any evidence to prove them. They're obviously true. We're not even going to waste our time or your time trying to prove these things are true. It's self-evident. They're obvious. Some things are just clearly true, at least to us Americans. They're not going to waste their time in the Declaration of Independence trying to prove it. They don't have to. These things are so obviously true, it's self-evident. Well, what? Comma. What's so obviously true that it doesn't need to be proven? That all men, time out, when they say men, they don't mean males. They meant all people, are evolved equal. Is that what it says?
No.
No. Oh, all men are what?
Created.
Created equal. Well, how come in our country today, the country that started with this document, the government-run schools, that's what a public school is, right? The government-run schools teaches our young people that they are evolved. Now, I know you're learning, I hope you're learning, in science class that that's unscientific. Are you learning that in science class? Yeah. I hope you're learning in Bible class that that's unbiblical. But now you're learning in history class, not only is it unscientific and unbiblical, to believe that we evolved is un-American. Why can I say that? Because in the document that gave birth to our country, we say that it's so true, we don't even have to prove it, that we were all created. Created how?
Equal.
Equal. That's an American ideal. We believe all people are created equal. Now, we don't believe that all people have equal talents. We're not equal height, right? We're not equal haircut, style. We're not equal in abilities and talents. Right? Maddox has a better swing with a baseball bat than I do. I don't have such a, we're not equal in that way. Some of you can run faster than me. Some of you are smarter than me. Some of you are more musically inclined than me. You can play instruments or sing. I'm pretty sure all of you are better on computers than I am. All right, we're not equal in talents. That's not what we mean. We don't mean we all have equal amounts of money. We don't all mean we're going to get an equal grade in history class. All right, that's not what we meant. What we mean when we say we're all created equal is we're all the same to God. He looks at us all the same. He loves us all the same. He treats us all the same. He doesn't have favorites. God treats everybody equally, which means that so should our government, right? We should be equal in the eyes of the law. Should anybody have special privileges because they're rich, or of a certain race, or of a certain religion, or because they're famous? No. Should anybody be treated less importantly because of their race, or their belief, or because they're homeless, or be whatever, right? No. We're all equal, should all be treated exactly the same. Basically what that means is if somebody does something wrong, somebody does something illegal, they should be punished for it. Even if they're famous? Yeah. Even if they're rich? Yeah. No matter what race they are? Yeah. No matter if they're Christians or atheists, everybody should be treated the same. That's what we mean. Now, let me ask you a question. Have we always lived up to that ideal?
No.
No. That's an American ideal, but we have not always lived up to it. In fact, the day this was written, slavery was legal. Does slavery sound like all people were being treated equally?
No.
No. So we already were not living up to that ideal. But does that mean the ideal isn't right?
Mm-mm.
No, the ideal is a truth. Doesn't even need to be proven. We just failed to live up to it. We were screwed up. There was something wrong, right? Had to be fixed. We fixed it, didn't we? This little thing called the Civil War almost destroyed our country. We fixed that inequality of slavery. And then eventually we had the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, 100 years after the Civil War. Fixed it even more. Excuse me, there's some Americans who are still thinking, we don't have that right. We need to fix it even more. Whether you or I agree or disagree, we can all agree that that is a great ideal, isn't it? That's what our country stands for. We always need to make sure that that's what's happening. Everybody gets treated the same. They don't get special privileges, and they don't get harsher treatment under the law. American ideal. By the way, for whatever it's worth, in my opinion, I am personally offended and actually disgusted when I see people, like athletes, who refuse to stand up for the national anthem, refuse to respect our flag, for this very reason right here. Because that flag does not stand for our government. It's not a symbol of our government. The flag isn't a symbol of Donald Trump or any other individual. The flag is not a symbol of a political party. The flag is certainly not a symbol of slavery, like some people think it is. The flag is a symbol of the ideals of America. And here are some of those ideals. Here's one of them. That is a great ideal, that we are all created equal. Of course we haven't always lived up to that, but that doesn't mean we should not respect the symbol of that ideal. To me, it's a facepalm when you disrespect the symbol of American equality. You're saying you don't believe in American equality. I do believe that everybody's equal. That's exactly why I will always respect that symbol of that, which is the American flag. To disrespect the flag means either you don't understand what it stands for, which is our great ideals, or you don't agree with those ideals. And in that case, your attitudes are un-American. So I don't know what the case is on some of these athletes that are kneeling. Maybe they're ignorant, and they don't understand that the symbols of the flag is for our great ideals, or maybe they're un-American. I don't know. I just know they're disrespecting those ideals by kneeling. All right, well, let's keep going. We believe these things to be true. They don't need to be proven. That we're all created equal. That we are endowed. Endowed just means given. When someone endows something to you, they give it to you. So that's easy to remember, right? We are given by our Creator. Capitalized. Who are they referring to?
God.
God. Not just a God. They're not referring to Allah. They're not referring to Buddha. They are in fact referring to Jehovah, the God of the Bible, the one only true living God, the all-powerful Creator. That He has given us certain things. By the way, that sends me off on another topic. Some people wonder, is America a Christian nation? Our former President, Barack Obama, traveled around the world, giving speeches saying that America is not a Christian nation. Well, that depends what you mean by that. If you mean Christianity is our official religion, well, no, then that we don't do that, right? England had an official religion, the Anglican Church, and that's why many of the settlers came to the New World, right? So we knew when we start our own country, we don't want to make that mistake. We don't want an official religion. We believe in an idea called freedom of religion. We want people to be free to worship the way they want. So if you mean America's not a Christian nation because Christianity is not our official religion, well, that's true. But if you mean America's a Christian nation because our heritage is Christianity, that is absolutely true. We certainly are a Christian nation if you're talking about our heritage and our beginnings. How do I know? Right there in the very document that gave birth to our country, and that country's still here, so that means this document still applies. We refer to the God of the Bible. It's our very heritage. We call that the Judeo-Christian ethic. In other words, what we believe as Americans, how we define what's right and what's wrong, good and evil. Remember we said there is such a thing as evil, right? How we define that is whatever the Bible says, whatever God says. That's the Judeo-Christian ethic. And that is how our country was founded. So if that's what you mean, you better believe it. Our country is a Christian nation. It's just not, we don't have an official religion. All right, so what did God give us? Endowed means given, right? What did God give us? Certain unalienable rights. Let's start with the word rights. I need you to understand a right is something you can do, period. You don't need permission. I need you to understand the difference between a right and a privilege. A privilege is something you need permission for. Mr. Kiefer, can I go to the bathroom? You need to ask permission for that privilege, right? Whatever. But a right, you don't need anyone's permission. Why? You can already do it. Why? Because God gave it to you. Given by God, you have rights. Unalienable means nobody ever, for any reason, ever has any business to take away your God-given rights because they didn't give them to you. Again, the Declaration of Independence does not give you rights. We're going to learn the Constitution. The Constitution does not give you rights. The U.S. government does not give you rights. Donald Trump does not give you rights. King George III did not give them rights. No one gives us rights except who? God. Which means no one can take away those rights. They can't. Why not? Because they're unalienable. No one has any business taking away our God-given rights. It's not privileges. We don't need permission for certain things, not if they're rights. Well, what are these rights that God gave us? Well, let's continue reading. That among these, in other words, they're saying, we're not going to list every single God-given right. We're just going to say these three are on the list of God-given rights. The first one is the right to life. Where did we get the gift of life?
God.
God gave us that right. It's unalienable. Does anybody have any business taking away your life?
Mm-mm.
No. That's why we make murder illegal, right? Someone takes away your life, who? That's a big deal. They have no business doing that because God gave you that life. Well, let's take that a step further. If you have a right to live, then we can assume from that you have a right to defend your life, don't you? So if someone is trying to take your life, and while you're defending yourself, you kill them, did you do anything wrong?
Mm-mm.
No. That's not murder. You killed them, but you did it defending your God-given right to life, which is unalienable. They had no business trying to take it, so you had every right to defend it, even if it means you had to kill them to do it. We call that self-defense, right? Nobody goes to prison when they kill somebody for self-defense, because that's a God-given right. On the same subject, if we have a right to life, and we have a right to defend that life, then it stands to reason that we have a right to have the very best tools to defend that life. What would that be at this day and age? A really good tool to defend your life.
A gun.
A gun. Makes sense, doesn't it? We have that right. Right? Because we have a right to life, so we have a right to the tools to use to defend that life. It's not an obligation, you don't have to, it's not a requirement, you just have a right to do that. By the way, when we say we have a right to life, who has a right to life?
Us.
All people. All people, it says right here, can you read? I can read. Right? We can read that. All people have a God-given right to life. What about unborn people?
Yes.
Yeah, people that are still in their mother's womb. Guess what? We all used to be an unborn person. Every one of us at one point, right? Now, we have since been born, but we were all at one point an unborn person. We still had a right to life then, didn't we? Does anyone have a right to take your life now?
Mm-mm.
No. Did anyone have a right to take your life then?
Nope.
No. You were a person then, you just weren't born yet. Which means a mother who doesn't want to be pregnant has no business taking away the life that God gave her baby. She didn't give the baby life, God gave the baby life. It's an unalienable right. She has no business taking it away. Think about the abortion doctor. I can't actually think of anything more despicable than that. What is an abortion doctor? Well, it's somebody who kills the most completely helpless and innocent life and gets paid for it. Is that not evil? You get paid for killing a helpless, innocent baby.
A lot too.
Whew. Hey, again, is that legal in America? Yeah, abortion's legal, isn't it? Are we living up to this ideal?
Mm-mm.
No, we are not. Something screwed up, isn't it? We need to fix that. Just like when we realized we were not living up to the ideal that all men are created equal, we knew something was screwed up, we fixed it. Same way now when it comes to, why do you think they call people who are against abortion pro-life? Right? Where do they get that term? Right to life. They get it from the Declaration of Independence. So, next time you argue with somebody that might be in favor of abortion, you can argue from your science class, because I hope your science class is teaching you that abortion is unscientific. I hope your Bible class is teaching you that abortion is unbiblical. But now you're learning in history class that not only that, abortion is un-American. Well, where does it say that? Declaration of Independence. All people are given by God certain rights that nobody can take away, and among those are the right to life. There it is. We can read. Now, you can be an American and not believe in that ideal, but then your attitudes are un-American, because that's one of our ideals. We wrote it down. Who believes it? We do. Victoria?
But if they did
What if we, and if that's your argument, then why don't we make murder legal?
No, I'm not, I don't agree.
No, I'm just saying, why don't we make murder legal? Because people have a right to life. So, saying we should make abortion legal is saying the same thing as we should make murder legal. Tell me what's the difference. Think about it. Tell me what's the difference. There's no difference.
When my sister, when she was looking for insurance for a baby, they were all abortion ones and she wouldn't take them. Then she finally found one that wasn't abortion, but she was really mad because they were all like abortion clinics.
I don't blame her for being mad. Alright, then there's a comma. What else do we have a God-given right to? Liberty, what's liberty mean? Freedom. Alright, we already know rebellion and tyrants is obedience to God. What Ben Franklin said. Well, here's what we mean. That's what we meant when we said God intends all people to live free. We wrote it right down in the Declaration of Independence. Not just Americans. We believe all people have a right, God-given right to live free, and no one has any right to take that freedom away. So when the government says you must do this, you can't do that, we gotta be really careful with that, because our freedom is an unalienable right. Right? The next one, certainly not the only God-given rights we have, just says among these, the pursuit of happiness. Does the Declaration of Independence say that you have a right to be happy? No, that's not what it says. Can't you read? What's it say you have a right to do?
Pursue.
Pursue happiness. Chase your happiness. Chase your dreams. Do whatever you think is going to make you happy. I wish we could guarantee happiness, but unfortunately, even if we write it down, we can't guarantee happiness, right? Can't do it. Some people think money will make them happy, or fame, or a certain relationship with another person, or whatever. A lot of people end up disappointed. We can't always guarantee happiness, but what we can guarantee is that the government can't get in the way of you doing whatever you think is going to make you happy. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, pursue happiness. So now let's reread this paragraph, rephrasing it with what we know it means, all right? We, as Americans, hold dear some things that we know are true, and they're so obvious we don't even have to prove it. All people are created equal and should be treated that way by the government. We are given by God certain rights, not privileges, rights that no one has any business taking away. Some of those things are our right to life, freedom, and to do whatever we think is going to make us happy. So, go back when we first read this, and I said, raise your hand if you heard it. You heard those words, but now I hope you understand how much is there. Told you Thomas Jefferson had a way with words. There's a lot right there, isn't there? There's a lot written right there. All right, I want you to look right under the paragraph we just read, and I got a question for you. What does it say? Everybody looking at it. Look at your Declaration of Independence. Right under the part we just read, it says our government has power over us, which they do. But my question is, where does the government get its power?
God.
Read it. Don't guess. Read it. What do we believe as Americans? It's right in the Declaration of Independence. Where does our government get its power? Derive means get. Where do they get their power?
Us. Government.
From the consent of the governed. In other words, our government has power. Why? Because we give it to them. That's awesome. They don't have power because they're born into some royal family. Sorry, King George. We're going to set up a government, and the only reason they're going to have power is because we give it to them. And that's the way our government still works today. Does our government have power over us? Of course they do. If I go speeding on my way home, the government, representative of the government, the police officer can pull me over and take my money. That's called a fine, right? He has the power to do that. Why? Because we give it to him. We agree to give him that power to keep our roads safe or whatever, right? but only because we give it to them. That's an important concept there. Also, I want you to look at the right column, the very top of the right column of the Declaration of Independence. And read that and understand this despotism, absolute despotism, where it says that means tyrants, tyranny. Now I got a question for you. Someone in our government becomes a tyrant. What do we have the right to do according to our founding document?
Impeach them?
You're guessing again, Ethan. I don't want your guesses. I want you to read.
Is there duty to throw off such government?
It's our right to throw off a government. A tyrant takes away your freedoms, right? Most Americans don't know this is in our founding document, the Declaration of Independence. If our government oversteps the authority that we give them, we have the right to throw off that government. That's why they were doing to King George III, weren't they? They were throwing off his authority. But there's another verb there. Not only do we have the right to do it, we have the what? To do it. I think you said it, Kateri.
Duty?
The duty. You understand the difference between a right and a duty?
Mm-hmm.
A right is something you can do if you choose to. A duty is something you ought to do. Let me rephrase that. This is what we believe as Americans. This is an American ideal, and again, most Americans do not know this is in the Declaration of Independence. If someone in our government becomes a tyrant, and they start overstepping their powers that we gave them, not only can we throw off their power, we ought to. We have the duty to. If you're not willing to do that, well, I'm sorry, then you have an un-American attitude. How do I know? Because that's what it says in the founding document. Don't ever forget that, because you never know when someone in our government might try to become a tyrant and take away our God-given rights. Tells you right there what you're supposed to do. You have a duty to get rid of that person as your leader. All right, eventually, they brought this thing back to the whole meeting. Everybody in the Congress, there were 56 men, the Committee of Five brought it back, and they made some slight changes, and they talked about it, and they discussed it, they argued a little bit, and then they took a vote, and then they decided to sign it. So you see over here this copy of the calligraphy version. Excuse me. This part right here, that's not Thomas Jefferson's handwriting. That's somebody in Philadelphia that was a professional calligrapher, good at handwriting, right? They wrote it all down. That's the whole Declaration of Independence, word for word. All the sentences that start with he, the parts we just read, that's all written right there. And then the men, one by one, signed it. John Hancock went first. His name has become synonymous with signature, isn't it? We say, give me your John Hancock right here. The top, middle, biggest signature, fancy handwriting, double underlined. And then John Hancock famously said, now King George can see that I signed this, and he doesn't even need his spectacles. He's like, take that, King George III. And then the rest of the guys, all 56 of them, signed it. Now, I need you to understand what they were signing. Look at the very end of the Declaration of Independence, the last sentence on page 97. Look at the last sentence. It starts, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. Whose providence?
Divine?
Whose providence?
Us.
God. They're referring to God again. Yes, we are a Christian nation. We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I want you to go back to page 60. That's a painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Look at the looks on their faces on page 60. Page 60. Look at the looks on their faces. Do they look like they're having a party?
Nope.
No, they look very somber, don't they? Because they know what they're signing. They're basically signing their death warrant. King George is getting a copy of this, isn't he? Do you think, when King George reads the Declaration of Independence, do you think he's gonna go, oh, you wanna be your own country? Why didn't you just say so? Is that what he's gonna do?
I don't see it from me.
Page 60? Why did I say page 60? I'm at page 90. My bad, I apologize. Page 90 is the famous painting of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Thanks for correcting me. They have somber looks, don't they? Because they know when King George finds out that they were part of this, oh, he's not gonna be happy. They are now guilty. If they're overthrowing his power, they're traitors to him, aren't they?
Mhm.
What's the penalty for treason?
Death.
Yeah, they know if they get caught, England could have them killed. Guess what? They knew that. Some of them were caught and tortured and killed. Some of them, their farms were destroyed, their ships were destroyed, their factories were destroyed. Why? Because they signed the Declaration of Independence. Some of them, their families were kidnapped. Remember we talked about yesterday, Thomas Paine's Common Sense? Do you think the guys who signed this were sunshine patriots?
Mm-mm.
No, they're willing to sacrifice, weren't they? And just by signing that, they pledged to each other their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. And they knew ahead of time this could cost them dearly. They signed it anyway. Not just for their freedom. Get this, they signed it for the idea of freedom. That's remarkable. They should be held up as heroes, right? Because that's why we have freedom. They were willing to sacrifice for our freedom. Pretty remarkable, those guys. All right, so some more pictures here. This is the building where that event took place. You can see this is a photograph, which means that building's still there. It's a historic site today. What city is that in?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. And the name of the building, at least nowadays, we didn't call it that then, but nowadays we call it Independence Hall, for obvious reasons, right? That's where our country was born. That's where it all started. July 4th, 1776. Inside that building is the room where the signing of the Declaration of Independence took place. Again, look at that picture on page 90. That's the same room. That's what it looked like in 1776. This is what it looks like now. Looks the same, doesn't it? In fact, some of the furniture nowadays, not all of it, but some of it is the original furniture that was actually there in 1776. Isn't it cool to live in a country where we treasure our beginning so much that we still have that building and that room and some of the furniture? Well, now the actual calligraphy copy, we still have it. It's not in Philadelphia though. We keep it in this building. This building's in Washington, D.C. It's called the National Archives Building. How cool of a country is this? We built an entire building just to keep important historic documents in, so we would remember our story. That's what history is, right? Story of our people. And in this is just thousands upon thousands of important documents, but the real treasures are kept in a special place in this room. This room is the rotunda. It's a round room, and you'll see around the edges of the room, there's people looking at different displays. Those displays rotate historic things, but in the middle, always on permanent display, one of those things is the Declaration of Independence. The actual one they signed on July 4th, 1776. And it really is in an impact-proof, vacuum-sealed vault, and every night after the museum closes, it does descend into a steel-reinforced concrete vault with all kinds of biometric security things. So you cannot steal the Declaration of Independence like they do in that movie, National Treasure. Besides, you don't need to. There's no treasure map on the back. Right? There's no treasure map on the back, but it does remind me of a story. Not too far from my hometown where I grew up in Pennsylvania, a man was garage sailing. He saw a picture frame, antique picture frame that he liked. He didn't like the picture, but he liked the frame. and he bought it for $2, thinking I'm gonna take it home and refinish it someday. Sat it in his garage for a couple of years, finally got around to it, wanted to strip all the old paint off, but before he started the project, he decided to take the back off the picture, remove the painting and everything in there, so he could work better. And a piece of paper fell out, and he read it. It was the Declaration of Independence, but it was a typewritten copy, not calligraphy. So he showed it to somebody that knew stuff about that, and he said, I think this is an original. Remember we said we sent copies to all 13 colonies, copies to all the leaders of the rest of the world? These were printed in a local print shop in Philadelphia, and we only had a handful of those originals in existence left in the world, and he found one in perfect condition. Who knows how long it's been in there and why it was back there, but it was an original copy. He sold it at auction for $2.4 million. $2 picture frame, $2.4 million treasure inside there. Why does that never happen to me?
He's
You
lucky.
could probably sell it from,
Pretty cool story, huh?
Why would you not sell that?
you could sell it for,
What
would
if someone like did somehow
Would you rather
say,
have $2.4 million or
Or keep
a piece of paper?
Well, then we can make a movie. Actually, we did make a movie.
I'd rather have $2.4 million.
he could probably
Just like
sell
take
it for
pictures.
more.
All right, before I tell you about our assignment, are there any questions that you have about the Declaration of Independence, what it means,
print it out.
who did it, when, where, how it was created, what it means, whatever? Any questions on it? Where it is now, anything? We got a couple of minutes, any questions?
Are we going to Washington DC this year?
I don't think we are, but I'm not positive about that. Where did they go last year, Boston?
Yeah.
So this year would be due to go to Washington DC, but because of the things going on with COVID and with riots, I'm not sure yet.
Go to my
If you haven't heard about it yet, probably not. Messing everything up, all this
When would
crazy
it
stuff.
be, November?
What?
When would the field trip be?
The trip would have been in like in spring. Like,
So like May,
yeah, May.
So we still might be able to go.
might, if it's like 2000 and.
Yeah, that's
All right, here's what you need to know about Monday. As you can see, we're having a quiz on Monday over the Declaration of Independence. So let me be specific. I'll tell you exactly what the quiz is gonna look like. It's gonna be these words right here.
Me.
All right,
Memorize
except,
Picture of that.
Where's
I'm
the-
gonna have that paragraph, except I'm gonna have 10 blanks.
Mom has to keep
I'm
her.
gonna take some words out. So you don't need a picture, you have it in your book. It's on page 97.
I'm gonna forget my book.
But since you don't know which words I'm gonna blank, you have to memorize it.
Oh,
Now you know what it means, so now commit it to memory.
Oh my god.
And then 10 blanks, so each one will be worth 10 points.
What are you doing? I didn't do a picture myself.
Make that your screensaver right there.
I know,
what do you do?